Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. Well, when France intervened in Mali back in January to try to push back Islamist insurgents, the world, or most of it at least, applauded the move as a timely strike against what they saw as a clear and present danger. The danger being, of course, the threat of jihadist-inspired terror emanating from a vast swath of mostly desert territory in Africa, stretching 3,400 miles from west to east, an area that we loosely call the Sahel. Now, my guest today is not in Africa, and he is not directly involved in the terror fight in any way, but what he is an MP in the British Parliament. He's been representing a district on the east coast of England since 2001. But last September, his remit broadened a bit. He's a minister in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and one of the remits in his broad dossier is Africa, North Africa also, and that's part of the reason he's here in France today, not the whole reason. Mark Simmonds, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I know you're on a sort of quick whirlwind tour here in Paris. I want to start with Africa itself and the fact I know you have spoken in the past about the fact that everyone drones on about conflicts in Africa, the negative story, and you want to stress the positive story. I'm going to get to that, but I can't help but start with the conflict, the negative. France is engaged in fierce fighting right now in Mali. Britain has lent quite a bit of support. I'm trying to get a sense from your side. David Cameron himself, your prime minister, said recently that the threat of terrorism from northern Africa is now perhaps as important, as serious as that from Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's a totally new threat that no one had really seen coming before.
Well, it is a relatively new threat, but there has been concern in the international communities for some time about what's been happening in the Sahel. And you're right to point out also that we offered limited logistical support to the French deployment, which, of course, let's not forget, was at the request of the civilian-led sovereign Malian government. And we very much hope that the military strategy is the first of several strands that need to be put in place to ensure, firstly, that Mali has territorial integrity, and that is put back in place. But secondly, there is a lasting political solution, which involves many of the groups in the north, and therefore that ultimately we break the cycle of conflict that, as you'll know, has reoccurred in that Sahel region for far too often.
It's very, very tricky, though, the situation there, in the sense that François Hollande said they will, at first said, we'll be there as long as necessary, but now he's saying that the French are looking to wind down, start pulling out next month. You said the Brits are lending logistical support. No combat role, no troops on the ground. That's absolutely been ruled out by Britain.
No, that's absolutely right. We've no plans. We've got no combat troops on the ground. We've got no plans to put combat troops on the ground. But what we are doing is offering limited logistical support, both to the French deployment. We're also participating in the EU training mission to train the Malian army. We're also providing support in terms of transport support to those countries from the ECOWAS region, Ghanaians, Nigerians, who are deploying as part of the AFISMA deployment, who will take over from the French.
One of the big needs, I guess, of the French in this entire battle, because they're fighting in the desert, is intelligence. They've been relying heavily on the U.S., we know, for drones, reconnaissance photography. Is that the type of support Britain can also give? Does Britain actually have drones? Stupid question.
Well, I can't go into the detail of the...
Do they have drones?
Of what we're doing, but we are supporting in an intelligence way. We have deployed some intelligence assets to assist the French with their deployment.
Special
and the
ops?
AFISMA
Are there special ops on the ground?
There are no combat troops in Mali, no.
Nothing at all. So let's just say that the French are not able to pull out next month. I mean, in other words, the French have indicated that they are willing to adapt to the circumstances on the ground. Is there any circumstance under which the British could see perhaps ramping up their contribution beyond what it is at the present time?
Well, not in the sense of putting combat troops on the ground. I don't see that happening. But certainly if the French government were to request further additional logistical support, we will look at it. We're also prepared to look at providing logistical support for the African troops that need to be deployed as well. You'll also be aware that there is quite a serious discussion taking place at a multilateral level at the United Nations about putting together a United Nations force that may ultimately replace the French and the AFISMA deployments.
Where are those talks right now? Is this something that you would see as imminent, transforming the African-led force to a more UN overseen force? Or?
Well, that's what's being discussed. And of course, it's quite complex when you get into the detail of all that. But ultimately, this isn't just about a military strategy. In our view, the French were absolutely right to deploy at the time they did. Otherwise, we'd have Islamist terrorists in Bamako by now. The other strands need to be put in place. The political solution, talking to people in the north, putting together a comprehensive political solution which will lead to elections that are planned in July. But there also needs to be a developmental and economic programme put in place to make sure that the political solution is sustainable and that we break the cycle of conflict.
Let me ask you, the French have been very clear when I said a clear and present danger. They see this as a threat that could spread to Europe, that could be taken to the streets of Paris. Is this a conflict that is now very much on the radar of the average Briton? Do your constituents really know from day to day that there's something going on in Mali and it potentially could affect them?
Well, they certainly do, those who watch the news and read the newspapers. It's been widely reported, the support that we're providing to the French deployment. But of course, whilst the French government are absolutely right in the potential threat that may occur back in France, also there are other potential problems that if the problem were allowed to spread in the region. There are very significant French and UK and other Western commercial interests in this part of West Africa. There are growing links between the Islamist groups in the Sahel and potentially in northern Nigeria. And so we've got to make sure, alongside the regional countries, those that form part of ECOWAS, that we work together to make sure that we remove this threat, both internationally and from the region.
Altogether, you mentioned very briefly northern Nigeria, and one of the groups we've been talking about here in France is this group Boko Haram, which has been involved in kidnappings, mostly strikes inside Nigeria. I know the UK has given quite a bit of aid to Nigeria for educational purposes. It seems that, though, maybe some of that aid needs to be used perhaps in the fight against terror there, against Boko Haram. I'm just wondering, I'm putting the question out there.
Yeah. Well, I was in northern Nigeria last week, and I met some of those who are trying to facilitate talks between the different religious groups, although it's not a religious conflict in northern Nigeria.
Were you in Abuja, the capital?
I was in Abuja, but I was in Kaduna as well in the north, and there is a significant UK international development programme there, as you quite rightly highlight, helping education and build capacity in the education system, also in healthcare and in building governmental capacity as well, and that's definitely the right strategy to have. So we can build capacity in the northern part of Nigeria through the education process, so people can engage in what you and I would understand as reasonable livelihoods and provide for themselves and their families through normal economic activity, rather than perhaps being tempted down this Islamist route.
You've talked about it, we mentioned in the beginning, the positive story out of Africa cannot be understated. It's a continent that is growing by leaps and bounds. Do you find it frustrating at times that the media attention is so much dominated by the negative stories out of Africa?
Well, I do. And certainly one of the issues that I find as I travel around Africa is that it is an extremely diverse continent. And one of the frustrations I have is this homogeneous view that Africa is one country. It is not. And Africa is at a very exciting point in terms of the potential economic development and economic growth, not just in the traditional industries of extractive industries and hydrocarbons, but also in a whole range of other areas, particularly as the African middle class grows and a consumer society grows. So I think there's a very exciting story to tell about Africa. And as The Economist said probably a couple of months ago, parts of Africa are now where India and China were 10 years ago.
Yeah, the Economist did a big survey recently on Africa as well. I want to just end with a question, not to get back to the negative news, but yes, to get back to the negative news a little bit. William Hague was speaking about the need, in the name of fighting terrorism, counterterrorism, the Foreign Minister, William Hague, sometimes you have to make alliances with some unsavory characters, or at least countries whose human rights records might not pass muster when applied to Western criteria. Do you believe that those types of alliances are justified in the name of a counter-terror fight?
Well, what we do very carefully is work with those countries that we believe need human rights development to increase their capacity of human rights development. And so we work alongside those governments where perhaps they don't have the same human rights standards that France and the UK would have, to try and develop them, to enable us to work more and more closely with them on counter-terrorism and a whole range of other issues as well.
I guess Algeria would be one example of that. David Cameron having recently met with the President Bouteflika there. I guess that's a country that's seen as very much, no matter what you think of its human rights record, necessary in the counter-terror fight?
Well, Algeria and the UK are very close allies in the fight against counter-terrorism, and of course they had to deal with this appalling atrocity in Amiens not that long ago.
In which there were British hostages as well.
Which there were British hostages as well, and British hostages lost their lives. And we found the Algerians to be extremely professional in their response to that crisis.
Mark Simmonds, we're going to have to leave it there. We've been talking really mostly about Africa, although I know you have responsibility for a lot of other areas which we did not have time to go into, including climate change, which perhaps we'll get to on another day. Thank you very much. MP for Boston and Skegness, but also a minister in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office here in France to talk about a lot of different issues, including, obviously, Mali. Thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for watching the interview here on France 24.